Because often you only think about your mental health when it's in a negative state. Um, but if you were aware of it much earlier and you started talking with people much earlier, then actually that sort of more desperate state of mental well-being or mental health wouldn't get to that point where you felt so desperate and felt so sort of alone at times. If you it's like if you think about your physical health, you wouldn't just go to the gym once, do a workout, and then think you're fit for the rest of your life. Sometimes, I wish it was that easy, but sadly it's not. So you have to continuously go to the gym to look after yourself, or go out walking, or whatever it is you do to keep yourself physically well. And so it makes sense that you should do that about your mental health as well.
That was our guest today, Nick Tong. Nick is Chief Technical Officer at Stint and is formerly of the mental health platform Unmind. In this episode, Nick talks with us about the Unmind platform and digital mental health more generally. He talks about the importance of looking after our mental health through a rigorous digital platform, and also what the future holds for digital and mental health approaches. I hope you enjoy this episode with Nick Tong. Nick, welcome to Digital Mindfulness. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm really looking forward to learning about more and the work that you're doing with digital mental health. So welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
So Nick, introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit more about how you came to be working in this space.
Sure. So I've sort of been in technology for well over 20 years, and in that time, I've sort of worked on a myriad of different platforms. I used to run a digital agency down in Brighton for over 10 years. And then probably for the last 10 years, I've sort of moved more into the startup space. And, something that, I think everybody who's listening to this, and probably most of the people we know, will have at some point been affected by mental health. So that's always been something that's sort of been very close to me. I myself have sort of been through various sort of bouts of sort of mental health sort of conditions, in terms of, people around me having issues. An ex of mine who committed suicide, and when I was a very young kid, my my father was killed. So there was sort of various things that we had to sort of deal with as a family, and as I've grown up, there's also been things that I've had to deal with myself. And so mental health's always sort of been there in my sort of consciousness. So when I had an opportunity to sort of combine my digital experience or technical expertise with mental health, I couldn't do anything but jump at the chance. And about 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, that opportunity came up. I just sort of left a food tech company, just helping them to raise some capital. And this opportunity came up, and I couldn't have asked for a better thing.
Gosh, Nick, thanks so much for sharing that. So let's move on now to Unmind. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about that and why that project is so important. But also, more importantly, for me, I think, is how Unmind came about.
Sure. So Unmind's a mental health and wellbeing platform. So we believe that everybody has the right to a healthy mind, just as much as you have a right to look after your body. So we sort of set out at the beginning of this project to sort of look at what platforms were out there and how they were addressing mental health. And what we found is that, there were lots of platforms that were just dealing with the area of mental health that's sort of reactive and not preventative. So we set out to work on a platform and to build a platform to be a preventative well-being platform. So if you think of mental health as a spectrum, and on that spectrum, on the sort of lower end of that, or on one end of that, you have the surviving, disengaged, and sort of struggling side of mental health. And the opposite, you have this sort of thriving, engaged, and focused aspect of it. And we decided to build a tool that would help you when you are feeling depressed or anxious, or even if you had the darkest thoughts around suicide. But we also wanted to make a platform that you're happy to go in even if you have a healthy state of mind and you're feeling buoyant about yourself. So that's the sort of thesis for how we started working on Unmind. So, ultimately the platform empowers employees and organizations to proactively measure, manage, and improve their mental health. We thought that's important to do within a digital platform, because you want that support if you're on a train, if you've just come out of a horrible meeting, or if you're just about to go for a run and you just want to find that a sort of state of flow for that run, that you've got this companion or this platform with you all of that time. So within the product itself, we sort of have 5 sort of key areas. We have a homepage where we have a bot that will interact with you. We have a tools section that will, sort of be short, snappy ways to interact with the platform. We have series, which is more like a learning and development aspect where, help you understand sleep, or if you're working with worry, or how to be, to work on being a positive parent. And there's areas to check in and to praise others as well, because we believe that, and we understand that giving praise is actually as beneficial as receiving praise. It's that there's sort of serendipitous moments that sort of happen throughout the day sometimes, where maybe you'll open the door for somebody when you're going into a shop, and that actually makes you feel good. You're not receiving that, but you're giving that. And that's the sort of thesis behind praise. And what we wanted to also make sure is that all of the content and everything we do is scientifically valid and built from leading industry experts. So we reach out and get experts within a marketplace to come and work with us to create the content on the platform, as well as having an in-house of brilliant people. So one of the other co-founders, called Steve, is got a myriad of awards for winning, for developing mental health platforms or well-being platforms, as well as clinical psychologists we have in-house as well. So we know that everything we do is clinically valid and sound. And then we build all of our content on 4 scientific pillars, which are sort of cognitive behavioral therapy, neuroscience, positive psychology, and mindfulness.
That's really fantastic, Nick. And it sounds like you're doing incredible work there. I wonder if you can describe to us, though, the difference between a reactive solution and a preventive solution, because you've spoken about the scientific pillars on which Unmind stands. What is the difference between those 2 approaches?
Well, Nick, our CEO, another Nick, it's always useful having 2 Nicks as co-founders of a business, but he's a clinical psychologist. And one of the things that he always says is that, whenever he's been treating people in the past, he just wished he got to them so much earlier. Because often you only think about your mental health when it's in a negative state. But if you were aware of it much earlier, and you started talking with people much earlier, then actually that sort of more desperate state of mental well-being or mental health wouldn't get to that point where you felt so desperate and felt so sort of alone at times. So having a preventative tool that you can use, that you can go in, use something called within the platform called the Unmind Index, which I can talk more about. But that is a tool that allows you to sort of measure your mental state over time. And what that will do is that will sort of signpost you through to different areas of the platform. So if you are, there are sort of 6 key areas that we'll measure within that. And if one of them are particularly low, then we'll point you to content on our platform to help you improve that area. And this is all being preventative. It's like, if you think about your physical health, you wouldn't just go to the gym once, do a workout, and then think you're fit for the rest of your life. Sometimes, I wish it was that easy, but sadly it's not. So you have to continuously go to the gym to look after yourself, or go out walking, or whatever it is you do to keep yourself physically well. And so it makes sense that you should do that about your mental health as well. And that's what I mean by proactive well-being.
I mean, Nick, this is one of the things I really was. That was actually my next question for you. I mean, you were going to elaborate more about the index, but I'm really interested to know, how do you measure mental health reliably?
So this is something that we've actually spent a lot of time on. So we have, as I mentioned before, we have clinical psychologists within the business. We have data analyst as well, who's also got a background in psychology. And they've put the questions that we've created, which are based on industry standard questions. They put them through the rigor, and we've come up with sort of 6 sort of key areas that we use to measure well-being. So that's around calmness, happiness, coping, sleep, health, and energy. And through a sort of series of questions that we ask you, we can then determine how you fit within those categories. And like I say, what if, say, your sleep is particularly low, and I'm sure we all know how important sleep is for mental health and well-being, then we'll push you through to a sleep series or a couple of sleep series that we have on the platform, or even sleep tools as well. So often people find it a bit difficult to fall asleep at night. We've got tools that can help you sort of drift off. Mm. There's also on the platform, we have the check-in feature as well. So this, taking diaries and, writing or discussing your moods definitely helps with, there's a lot of evidence to show that helps with mental health and well-being. So you can check in, you can have a quick gauge of what your mood is, take a note of what your feelings are, and then write some content as well. So you can diarize how you're feeling about your mood, and you can measure that over time. So a combination of those tools and the index helps us sort of measure how people are doing with their mental health.
I'm really interested to know because, like, as you mentioned, Unmind is, and again, you can correct me if this is wrong, but it's a mature product now, and you're working with a lot of different clients now with this. But it'd be really good it'd be really great if you could let us know, has there been, is there more openness now for the people or the companies that you work with to adopting tools or solutions like Unmind, or is there still a little bit of resistance that you encounter?
Yeah, so I think when the market, probably about 3 years ago when we entered the market was starting to become much more aware of it. I mean, sure, industry has been aware of it for a long time. But, I think people or industry now sees it as something that's vital to the well-being of the platform. There's so much research out there that says, if you have a healthy workforce and, workforce that's energized to come in and work, as a company, you're going to get much more benefit out of them. So even from, a sort of commercial viewpoint, it makes sense to, support your staff through what they're going through, or, to give them healthy food, or, support them to go to the gym. But mental health is one of those aspects that wasn't really being supported as well as those other aspects. But like I say, over the last 3 years, that's really started to pick up, and we sort of managed to have hit the ground when the market was becoming more aware of this. But you have to sort of nod or sort of tip my hat at other companies that sort of shone before us. So Headspace always been in the market for a while. What they've done as well is they've done a great job of educating the market, making people much more aware of mental health and well-being. But they focus on one particular sort of stream, which is around mindfulness. But we believe that there's much broader aspect to mental health, and that's obviously why we have those 4 pillars that I spoke about earlier.
One thing that really jumped out to me when looking at the site and at your offering is that there's a large extent to which there are lots of different prompts and nudges that shift people towards better behaviors that would impact positively on their mental health. So what I'd really like to know, though, is there a stage within the system that it becomes aware of a greater emergency that perhaps authorities need to be aware of and alerts them automatically?
Sure. So we're not we're not an intervention platform. So one of the things that we won't do is, we won't say, oh, we think you've got this condition or that condition. Obviously, it takes an expert to know that. But if people are feeling desperate, so we have something called the help section within our platform, and what that is that's just a bunch of content that allows people to delve deeper. But we actually also work with our clients in that regard as well. So we're pulling content that's more specific to their business within our help section. So if people are feeling, very sort of desperate, then we obviously have links through to the Samaritans, for example, or through to Mind, where you can start speaking to people. With some of our clients as well, that have specific lines that they'll ask their employees to call as well. So there is some bespoke content that we put on the platform per client, but largely it's a bit more in depth around certain subject matters that we don't want to deliver through the series and through the tools. But as I say, it's a signpost there as well for if people do need that more sort of urgent help, we'll then pass them the details that's relevant to them. One of the key things around that as well is that it's location specific as well. So if you're, in the States or, in some parts of Europe, the call centers that it will give you to call will be relevant to where you are.
One of the things that I've started to think about as you were speaking is the whole idea of data, and in particular, if you are at an organization using Unmind and your mental health is being measured and recorded, what actually happens to that data? Is it something that you can take with you and work on? Because I'm thinking that for individuals that would be incredibly valuable, but also incredibly dangerous if that information was to fall into the wrong hands.
Sure. Yeah, no, and you've come onto a topic that's been very close to my heart from the beginning. Data, obviously being in tech, data's a thing that I worry about a lot, and it's something that we've taken into consideration on every aspect of what we build. Every feature that we build goes through a privacy impact assessment, and all the data that we have is encrypted, and we have lots of security checks around that as well. So I'm slightly paranoid about data, so I certainly want to make sure that everything's protected. And I say something that's so personal to somebody as well. I made sure we sort of went through that extra rigor to make sure that they're protected. Coming back to the first point, I think more around can an employer see the employee's details? Absolutely not. So we actually have the relationship with the employee rather than the employer passing on that relationship. So if you signed up your business, you would actually, your employees would come and sign directly on the Unmind platform. So the relationship is between Unmind and the user. What that then enables us to do is to keep the anonymity between the employer and ourselves, on one side. So what that means is that as an employer, you can log into the platform, you can see the general analytics across the entire organization, but you can't find out, for example, that 2 people within your ID department are feeling anxious or depressed. There needs to be a certain Zoom level that you can go down to get insight data. So if there's anything that can identify anybody, then we certainly don't show that to the employer.
I'm imagining, Nick, that this must have been one of the critical challenges for the team. Not so much whether you can build out the capability of a digital mental health platform, but the extent to which it gets involved with people's actual mental health. Even if a practitioner was seeing a patient in person, these are the ethical challenges that they'd have to grapple with.
Yeah, I think it's important that we actually empower the users to look after their mental health, and that's what we're trying to do. We don't want the employee to become like the custodian of the data or how people should act with it. And also, you may come in some days and feel like we all have periods in our life where we're stressed and we're anxious and we're just generally feeling a bit shit about stuff. but that doesn't mean that, that should get flagged for your employer to say, Nick's not feeling great today. You should go and have a cup of coffee with him and try and cheer him up. It's if you, and if you're somebody that's for maybe 2-3 weeks logging into the platform and you are feeling, really negative, then we'll just keep within the platform itself. We'll just keep nudging you to go towards tools or to go to a series that can help you understand perhaps why you're feeling that way and give you, ideas of how you can move out of that state of mental well-being. But from an employee point of view, I don't see why they should be able to identify individual people on the platform. What an employer wants to know, generally, is that their staff are getting access to mental health support as and when they need it. And that's what we hope to provide.
So, Nick, given that you've worked in this space for such a long time, looking forward, it'd be really great to know your opinion and how you see the industry unfolding over the years. Where do you see digital and mental health progressing in the next 5 years?
Yes, I see that we're actually, we're just at the very beginning of this journey. I think there's been huge advances in awareness of apps within the marketplace. And as we're trying to remove the stigma around mental health, and stigma is a huge thing with mental health. It's something that we're trying to stamp out with Unmind as well. But as the stigma starts to be removed, I think we'll start to see people using technologies more openly, and actually more sort of consciously using them as well. So, often on the train when I'm commuting in, I can see, it's a beautiful thing to see people with their headphones on, just sitting, closing their eyes in a sort of upright position, taking deep breaths. And you think, okay, this person's preparing for the day, and that's a great thing. But I think this is going to become more open. And in doing that, I think it's going to give technology the appetite to be more adventurous in what we get people to do with it. And in that sense, so at the moment we may be doing audio content, we might be doing video content. We then have tools like the Muse, which measures your brain. If we start then combining these technologies, then we can enhance the user experience much, much better. And by doing that, I think we'll be able to affect people in a more positive way more quickly as well. And that sort of blending of technologies, I think, is where we're going to see some of the advances within the next year or so. We can start to see some of them coming through now. You think of virtual reality, augmented reality, what that can do for PTSD. If you combine that with other tools around that maybe help you diarize how you're feeling, or, that you can tap into as and when you need to, rather than having to go into virtual reality space. I think that those sort of blending of tools is going to be something that we'll see a lot more of.
And it's interesting, like, very last thing, but it seems that these tools, what you're speaking about, they give greater feedback. It sounds like they give greater human feedback. So for example, you mentioned virtual reality. I mean, that's incredibly immersive, that technology. And I don't know, you were talking about other technologies, but it sounds like almost like technologies that give greater feedback, human feedback, that might be a source of innovation next year.
Definitely. And you start seeing that. You can see that, you look at, go back 3 or 4 years when, Google Health or the iWatch came out, that they were just the very start of what we're seeing now, with the latest release to the iOS, for example. It now monitors your heart rate much more for irregularities in your heart rate. So I think as these technologies develop, we'll definitely see them become much more sensitive, and people, blending them much better to give people like you say, that immersive experience. Wouldn't it be great that, you're on your drive home, your heart monitor's going, okay, Nick's had a bit of a stressful drive home. When you walk in through the door, the lights sort of dim. There's some ambient music on in the background. Your aromatherapy IoT device is sparked up and is creating nice scents as you walk through the room. And your oven's on at the temperature ready for you to start cooking. That'd be an amazing thing. And I can see things like that happening.
And that's not difficult to do. I mean, the technology
No,
isn't it?
exactly. I'm actually just about to buy a house, and IoT is going to play a big part in that.
Amazing. Nick, this has been fantastic. Where can people find out more about you and your work and connect with you and Unmind?
Sure. So Unmind, you can find us at unmind.com or UnmindHQ on Twitter and on Instagram. Myself, I'm on Twitter at Nick Tong, or LinkedIn is another way to reach out to me as well.
Brilliant. Nick, it's been a complete pleasure speaking to you, and what you're doing at Unmind is really fantastic, and I wish you all the very best with it. So thank you.
No, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and carry on with the good work.